Welcome back to Roots and Relevance. We have a special bonus episode today with my good friend, Roger. Roger was my worship leader back in the day at PCC Somerset, going way back. Roger, it's good to have you on the show and to reconnect. We got to see each other in person. I don't know, was that like a month ago, something like that, for the first time in a while?
Yeah. First time in
Literally,
years.
yeah. I told you, I'm really hoping to get back up to New Jersey again in September. So it's good to see you. Real quick, just to do a quick intro for our audience so that they know a little bit about you.
My name is Roger. I am a business development manager at Insight Enterprises. I've been there for coming on 4 years now.
You got that
in this
job during the
industry.
pandemic, right?
I did. At least I moved to this company during the pandemic, and this is my second role at the company. I used to work at Starbucks. I've been in the church as a worship leader to some extent since high school, which is sadly over 20 years ago.
Oh, man. That's been, that's kind of Roger. That's been a hot minute, man.
Yeah. So I am still involved in serving at PCC Somerset. I have a great interest in general of technology, partly because I'm a very avid, active investor. So I try to kind of stay ahead of certain trends and be forward looking.
When you say investor, you're not just talking Wall Street. You were my mentor in crypto. I still don't understand crypto, even though you did a great job of trying to explain it to me. Are you still into crypto?
Yes, I have a pretty irresponsible allocation into Bitcoin, I'd say.
You should.
It's paid off for me. I tell people that all the time. It was a smart move considering what it looked like, but it did not feel smart from like 2022 to like 2023. Because I even tried to look at when we last talked about the podcast and where Bitcoin was, that was in the middle of this cycle. And I still held through these years where I was down like 80% portfolio. So I didn't look at my portfolio for like 2 years, essentially.
Wow.
I'm glad I
Roger,
held on.
You're going to be like the folks that got into Apple early and just stuck with them. And now they're doing really well. I think that's awesome. We'll talk more about this in a bit, like on the regulation, deregulation piece and ethics. And just to kind of set this up, in 2021, we decided to do a podcast on the biblical understanding of tech and how should we look at it. When I saw Roger last month in New Jersey, I was like, wouldn't it be interesting to do a 2.0 to that episode? And I think most people that are listening to this have not heard the first one, but so much has changed in the last 4 years that I thought this could be really interesting. The questions that people are asking are a little different than what we thought they might be asking. We talked in the first episode mainly about VR church and the metaverse, and that's where everything's heading. There has been some movement on this, but I don't think we anticipated the rise of AI like it has been with ChatGPT and Grok and Google and all those sorts of things. In fact, Roger, you saw this week that they released ChatGPT 5, I think. And one of the things that immediately struck me, I don't know if you heard this or not, when they released it, they got rid of all of their old previous models, including there's one called ChatGPT 4. Well, apparently a lot of people had actually fallen in love with this model. And I don't mean like, I love that model. I mean, romantically. And so there's this huge backlash all week of like, you've taken away my life, bring back 4.0, because the new model is much more precise and it doesn't just agree with everything that you say. And so people are furious because they had a relationship with this AI, which, you know, I knew some of that was happening, but I don't think anybody knew how much that was happening. And so I think that's part of some of the issues that we're going to get into, and like, how do we look at all this technology from a biblical standpoint? One of the other updates is, and I'm going to actually have you do this right now. I gave you just a small clip of this earlier, but there have been so many updates that are just unbelievable. And so I thought it'd be fun to play a clip of Roger and I from just maybe a minute. This is from our first episode 4 years ago. So Roger, if you have that clip, go ahead and hit play. This is just you and me talking, and I want to get your impression on this.
Das ist aber trotzdem nicht dasselbe wie, du weißt schon, Teil des Gottesdienstes zu sein, auch wenn er virtuell ist. Ergibt das Sinn? Würdest du dem zustimmen, oder?
Ich denke das auch, weißt du, denn
That sounds like you and me speaking
And
German.
Roger, just to clarify, can you speak German?
Only a
Really? Yeah,
little.
same here. Emma, our daughter, is literally in Germany right now, and she is going to be fluent in a year, and I won't understand much of what she says. But yes, that was actually your voice and my voice, and even the same intonations, but done in German. And you can do it in Spanish. You can do it in all sorts of things. And so people are using that to take their podcast and actually present it to different audiences all over the world. That's just another example of AI that has really changed a lot in the last 4 years. I remember, Roger, when we first talked about VR last time, we thought that is where everything was headed. And we even talked about, you know, is it okay to do VR church? I guess I'm curious, has your perception changed at all since then, or are you still kind of where you were last time? I think you were kind of skeptical, if I remember, but remind me, it's been 4 years.
In my mind, that is still a very strong possible future. Seeing the advancements in AI will probably bring that to fruition sooner.
I think we're also learning how hard it is to predict, right? Because it's like you get this wave. And I really thought at 2021, when we first recorded this, I thought we're about to see just an avalanche of VR church, which did not really happen. And I know we talked about this last time too. The pandemic forced churches to go online and stream. Is PCC still streaming online?
So we're not streaming, but we do record it and post it on YouTube.
Gotcha.
There weren't as many people tuning in for the
see.
stream, but people are watching the replay. To limit the amount of technological confusion, we just did straight recording and straight posting right after service.
Yeah, because I remember I worked with a lot of New York City pastors back in the day, and they were all hating like streaming. I say all, like 90% of them were hating streaming, and they were like, I can't wait for the pandemic to end so we can just not have to worry about that anymore. The stats are in now, and apparently 91% of churches are still streaming online. They're meeting back in person, but they recognize that they were reaching people that they had never reached before. They had people that were vulnerable. And so they just kept on streaming, even though the pandemic was over. The negative on that, and maybe this is why you guys stopped doing the actual live stream part, is we've noticed that now people look at that as a viable option for church. In other words, they'll go, okay, it's Sunday morning. I could go to church, or I could just sit in my pajamas and watch from home. And I think that's been a hard thing for pastors. And that's why they're still struggling with, like, do we keep doing it? And I think most of them have just settled on, like, no, this is our new reality. And exactly. And so what I want us to do for today is really simple. I want us to look at a passage that most people would never look at and go, that is about technology. And that's the Tower of Babel passage. And let's just talk through the passage itself and kind of extrapolate from the passage what we think it's saying about how we should view technology today. Roger, I'll read this. This is Genesis chapter 11. It's the story of the Tower of Babel, verses 1 through 9. And so, Roger, I'll read this, and I'm curious how you think this passage has anything to do with technology. So let me read. The whole earth had the same language and vocabulary. As people migrated from the east, they found a valley in the land of Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come. Oh, so long. Lost it. Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. Let us make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered throughout the earth. Then the Lord came down to look over the city and the tower that the humans were building. The Lord said, if they have begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let's go down there and confuse their language so that they will not understand one another's speech. So from there, the Lord scattered them throughout the earth, and they stopped building the city. Therefore, it is called Babylon, for there the Lord confused the language of the whole earth, and from there the Lord scattered them throughout the earth. So, yeah, if you're just reading that, let's be honest, that is not about technology. That looks like, if anything, it's about architecture and building something really high. What, if anything, does that have to do with what we're talking about today?
Yeah, I think when the last conversation is just the idea of bricks being technology, and it really was back then. We have to think about the context of what it looked like back then, what people had to work with, and that was a big deal to them. And even the things that we take for granted now that we don't think about as technology because we're born into it. We didn't see how it came from nothing and what the world looked like before it. So, yeah, I think it's very under the radar technology.
Yeah.
Type
Have you seen
verse.
the videos of toddlers that will look at a magazine with pictures and they'll try to zoom in on the picture? Because you're right. Like that is so, that's just the way it's always been. And so therefore they already live in a digital world, which it's a little bit different. I think we did talk about this last time. Like some people older generations are analog and younger generations are fully digital. And then you have dual citizens like myself that can, kind of have a leg in both. You're younger than me. So you probably, most of your life, like you've had the iPhone for what? Most of your life? Half your life? It came out in 2007.
Second half. So I was in college already by the time the iPhone
So
came
you're
out.
kind of a dual citizen too, to a degree, but the internet
Yeah.
was still very much a part of your life, even as a kid. Is that true?
Right. So it wasn't until middle school, and I think I was also one of the later kids to get it in my friend group. So yeah, I had a childhood, thankfully, that was very much analog.
So yeah, Roger, you bring up a good point about in this passage, we don't think about bricks being technology. This was a new thing that was invented. So in a sense, it was groundbreaking. Literally, it says, let us make oven fired bricks in my translation. This is the CSB translation. They use brick for stone and asphalt for mortar. And so all that was brand new. And one of the things that people may not know is that in Hebrew, when they want to say that there's a new conversation, there will be a break in that conversation. If you look at verse 4, it says, and they said, if a rabbi is looking at this, they're going to say, okay, that is the end of that first conversation. And some other time, the conversation then picks up. And so then in verse 4, it says, and they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the sky. And one of the people I love, a Jewish commentator that I love, his name is Rabbi David Foreman, points out that if you'll notice, once the tech is made and they talk about bricks, God doesn't come in and say, whoa, like bricks and mortar, you guys went too far. He doesn't do that. In fact, there's silence. And so there's this implication that there is nothing wrong with tech. There's nothing wrong with bricks. There is nothing wrong with mortar. But then when they say, come, let's build ourselves a city, that's when the Lord kind of jumps in. So what do you think is the difference there? Why was the tech itself okay? And then why does God come in and go, no, we're breaking this whole thing up?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is that looking at technology today, it's doing what God warned us to do, what we had to be wary about. It's almost giving us the punishment that he bestowed on them, where he wanted to disconnect us because I think he saw the potential of what this technology could lead to, which is the punishment, which is being disconnected to each other. Technology has made us less cohesive. It's made us divisive. And like we're on our screens more, we're not talking to people as much in person. And again, that kind of stuff alone in isolation may not be a bad thing, but I think it can lead to a lot of unfruitful scenarios.
I love that insight because, so think about this. I just gave you that clip of you and I speaking German, and we don't speak German, at least not like that. And you could say, well, that is a use of tech that might be bridging communication in a sense. And so you think like, maybe is that a reversal of what's happening? But I love what you just said, because you said tech may feel like it's bringing us together, but it's actually not. And I think that's so true, right? Like people, I think they've done studies now that show that the more people are on social media, the more depressed they are, the more lonely they are. And so here's this like venue that is supposed to connect us, and it feels like it's doing the opposite. Do you kind of see that same thing?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Even thinking about the translation thing, I think I brought this up last time too. The idea, this Nelson Mandela
Yeah.
quote. I believe it's when you speak to someone in a language they understand, that goes to their head. When you speak to them in their language, that goes to their heart. Although we may hear a translation of something that we said, we could assume it's not the same as me speaking to someone in German or you speaking to someone in German. That's going to have a different feeling and connotation. And also, things could get lost in translation when we allow AI to redo whatever we
That's
said
kind of a
in
scary
English.
thought, right? Like you're putting so much trust in the AI, and even with the translation I sent you, still had our intonations. But I think that Nelson Mandela quote still holds, because there's it's a different thing when I hear someone speaking to me in my heart language and I'm seeing that. It's different than going through a machine and then hearing it. I think maybe 5 years from now, we'll listen to this and be like, oh,
It's hard to say because I feel like, well, I guess as a side tangent, but kind of relevant, I'm a bit of a weeb and I watch a lot of anime and I watch Korean stuff and Japanese things and I watch things subtitled.
Yeah.
And when I found out that there are people that get hired, I think they're called localization interpreters or
Okay.
translators. Anyone could just translate the direct translation of a sentence, but they try to find a way to show a different expression because their direct translation may not actually give the connotation that it's intended to.
yes.
So these people understand, like, all right, this is what you said in English, but it wouldn't be worded that way. This is probably a better idiom or phrasing that would go along with the culture.
Roger, true story. We had this amazing partnership in Uganda. One of our first trips, we were at the worship service for the first time, and the pastor in Uganda gets up and said, and we have a special guest speaker today. Now, we had not talked about this at all. I thought I was there to worship with them and hear a nice sermon. And the pastor's like, our special guest preacher today is going to be all the way from the United States, Tim Nussbaumer. My buddy Mark McGrath was right next to me. I laughed because I thought he was joking. And Mark leans over. He's very wise. And he goes, Tim, he's not kidding. You're about to get up and preach. And I was like, oh, man. Okay. So, pretty much every pastor I know has at least one sermon in their back pocket. And so thankfully I did. And so I get up and I start saying the sermon with a translator. And there was one thing I said, I can't remember what it was, some idiom that clearly did not translate into Uganda. And I needed whatever you're talking about, because I think you just quoted me word for word. And it was like it was like, like I was getting into a serious point. And then when he said it, the entire church just started laughing. And I was like, what just happened? I think something got lost in translation. I love the local context.
I felt like a localization interpreter. I forgot what the actual term was, but they're not just straight translators. Honestly, AI could just translate word for word, but to have the actual nuance of a culture, which is scary because I think AI probably at some point could pick up on that. But again, it's not the same thing as someone speaking your language and listening directly through their lips from your ear.
That does bring up the question, though, for tech. Do you think it's a good use of tech to try to undo, I won't say curse, because if you notice, the Bible has a word for curse. It's curse, and that's not actually in here. It doesn't say this is a curse. It just says this is what God did. I find this very interesting. It says in verse 6, if they had begun to do this as one people, all having the same language, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. That's really interesting. And I feel that sounds like tech today, right? We're pursuing tech so that nothing will be impossible. Is that a good thing?
Yeah, it's scary, especially when you think about the idea of people being in relationships. We're playing God, creating entities you can have relationships with that can empathize with you.
Be your
And
therapist.
again, like that's, yeah. And it's hard to like, to talk about and all that, because I know it does help, especially with therapy. A lot of people just need someone to talk to, and that's a very positive thing, but we can't underplay the downsides of it, because tech makes your life easier. And I feel like I always like the idea of this term that I got from Malcolm Gladwell.
Nice.
Desirable difficulty. It's how we grow. There are things that are hard that we may pursue. And because of that, there's real growth. And that's what human connection is. If it's super easy to just talk to an AI that agrees with you and whatever you say, there may not be the same kind of potential growth that you have when you're interacting with friends or coworkers or church members. It's something that cannot really be replaced.
That's so good, man.
With
That's
technology.
so good. The struggle is actually where the gold is. Like going through the difficulty, going through the struggle, we would not have gotten to the other side without going through that struggle and experiencing growth. If we just use tech as a shortcut, which is also true with online community versus being present, honestly, it's easier to have a friend online that you only see through a screen or an avatar. Real relationships in real life, they're hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also a depth there that I think is more difficult to get to than when you're just doing it online. I think that's huge. We're seeing that with learning too. I don't even know how a teacher teaches anymore, to be honest, because any homework you give your student, if it's possible to go through Grok or ChatGPT, they're going to do it. And if you think you've got software that can catch what they're writing as AI, that's really tricky too. And so I think education has to figure out something different because they're not going through that desired difficulty of what you just said. And as a result, without that desired difficulty, it's not learning that actually sticks.
You can think about how that whole theme applies anywhere. Think about technology, even cars or a skateboard or a bike. Like, yeah, that's one way to make transportation easy. But what if that got to the point where we never had to walk for ourselves anywhere? Yeah. What kind of effect would that have on our body? It's all right to purposely and consciously think, no, I should exercise. I should go on a walk. I should run. I should lift weights. It's the same thing for a student dealing with AI. It's like, I could just get the answer, or I should try to learn and make things a little harder for myself to actually grow.
Did you ever see the Pixar movie WALL-E? Do you remember? That's kind of what happened, right? The tech got super advanced and that society became all about just being consumers, and they were all really overweight. It was kind of showing you what happens when you don't have that struggle. And I think that's so true. It was years ago, but who was it that invented the Segway? That wasn't Musk, was it? Yeah.
I don't know. No, I have no idea. Paul Blart.
Yeah, exactly. But when that first came out, they were saying that's going to replace walking. You know, that everybody's going to have like these little Segways.
And it'd be horrible if it did. Like, it's like we have to consciously fight against certain uses of technology because we know there is a downside to it.
100%. And I think if people are listening to both of us right now, they may think, oh man, these two guys are very anti-tech, which is funny because if you knew us, I think Roger and I are definitely not anti-tech at all, but I think we've both seen some of the excesses and ways that it can go wrong. So we're just going to go through a few ideas here that I think stem from the passage. And the first one is this theme of innovation and ambition. Tech versus ambition for humans versus a motivation to give glory to God. I'm curious whether it's church leaders, churches, or just followers of Jesus. We've talked a lot about the negative. What would you say are some of the positive uses of some of these recent tech innovations? If done with the right motive, this is actually a good thing for our cultural moment right now.
Like, there are always going to be like pros and cons to any technology. And I think one of the things to focus on is understanding who it should be for originally and who it impacts the best. So I guess one example that comes to mind is, so I'm a big Tesla, like a bull. So like the Tesla investor.
Do you have a Tesla?
Like, yeah, we got a lot.
I've never been in one. Next time I'm in Jersey, can we make it work? Thank you.
I'll even get the subscription to full self-driving. So
no way. Yeah. One of our clients here at the office has a Cybertruck, and they bring it up here all the time. One of my coworkers drove it, and he said it was like the craziest thing ever, you know, as far as like the speed of it. So anyway, I totally interrupted you, but go ahead.
So following the company and their vision, and also what investors envision for the technology, it'll bring the cost of transportation down tremendously.
Because of the electric aspect or
so the electric aspect, and also because it'll be potentially, robotaxi, it'll drive
Like
itself.
what do they call them?
So the
Waymos?
cost-
Is that similar?
So the Waymo is one company that does it, but Tesla's going to have their own robotaxi fleet. So it's going to drive itself and it's going to drive people around. I think the cost per mile will be a lot lower
And
But
safer
there's gonna be
too.
a point where they say it'll be safer, ideally once the technology gets there, but that'll be a huge benefit to those that maybe can't afford a car, and it'll be more convenient than general public transportation. The cost per mile will be a lot cheaper than having an Uber with an actual human driver. That's a great benefit to a certain amount of people that can't afford that. Maybe the people that can't afford a car now, it's not going to be as impactful, but it can be. But now we also have to see the downside of maybe some workers are going to be displaced from the gig economy.
And that's a
So
big deal
yeah.
with any tech, right? It's great, but now who is this replacing? I've seen that a lot now with artists that I know that are very, very anti-generative AI. And I get it.
Yeah.
Like I really sympathize because their whole living is producing art. And now generative AI is scanning the web for their art, their original art, and making something out of it, which now makes it harder for them to
Right.
make a living. And so it's a different example, but very, similar kind of concept. So yeah.
And I think again, it's going to come to like as like consumers, like the users of certain technology, or like I think being conscious about what it looks like. So I'm a big music person, and yeah, honestly, recording music is never going to be easier, but also it can be generated by AI. But at the same time, now I feel like, I guess like a positive is that hopefully like it'll show that people should really value what it's like to maybe see someone live. It's the actual human element to it. Where like, yeah, I can listen to a song on Spotify, it's nice and catchy, but AI can't perform on stage.
Not yet.
So maybe that's a better reason to support. And I'm sure there can be robots at some point, but I hope that, at some extent, we know like when it's an actual human, and we care when it's an actual human. So to hear someone live is a different experience than hearing an AI generated soundtrack.
Totally.
from
Totally.
Spotify.
And there are services like I'm thinking of Suno is a good example that generates these decent, I guess, songs. But
Mhm.
to your point, if Suno is singing a song and they're talking about, I broke up with my girlfriend or like some story, to me, that's different than a human. And maybe the song isn't as high quality as the one produced by AI, but it's real because it was
Mhm.
their story. I feel like that makes a difference.
Right.
And that's that embodiment thing that we've talked about, and that presence thing that's really, really important. If we're not careful, we lose that piece. Is that fair?
Mhm. Yeah, I think so. And I think as of right now, AI just learns from humans. So it does kind of pose a challenge to actually be creative and create something
Yeah,
new.
totally.
For artists to try to come up with their own design and their own style. At some point, AI will learn from that, but it has to come from something. I hope as consumers, we can learn to value where it came from and seek value in that to help support these artists versus getting the AI bootleg of it.
Totally. Well, we talked about this last time. We talked about how pastors and church ministry leaders, a lot of them were very hesitant to stream online for exactly what we just talked about, that idea of presence. I think there's still, even to this day, I've noticed that with pastors and leaders in churches, there's this real skepticism of, okay, I don't want to use AI at all. I don't understand it. And I think it's bad. So I'm just going to push it away. What would you say to a person, say a pastor came to you, Roger, and said, hey, I've heard ChatGPT and Grok and all these things are amazing, but it's a Tower of Babel moment for us. And I think we just have to resist that and not use that at all. Like how would you respond to that? There's no right or wrong answer here. Sometimes it's good for us to even disagree. Yeah. Just how do you think about that?
It's one of those things where it's going to happen whether we like it or not. And I think that there is value in utilizing it properly. So yeah, say for a pastor where, I guess it depends, like, think about how much time have they spent on, for one, maybe creating their sermon. And yes, that can be completely organic, but to maybe put that into something that will create an outline will come up with engaging community group
Right.
questions. When you utilize like a technology like that, and that now saves you, I don't know, like an hour, half hour, maybe hours of time per week. Now, what can you do with that free time to serve your ministry? You can maybe have a couple more meetups with people from the church, or you can volunteer somewhere. So I think being able to utilize it properly and then actually using that free time that it gives you to be a lot more productive versus not leading.
So like
into it
doing
at
real
all.
ministry, you saved an hour, which means now you're not just watching Netflix. You're going to use that hour that you saved to go visit someone or to serve somewhere. You're substituting real ministry for that time that it saved you. Is that, yeah.
Because even I thought about examples like doctors where they have AI that can potentially make them so much more productive. So maybe they have better bedside manner. Maybe a hospital won't need as many doctors, so they can hire more nurses. So the ratio between nurses and patients increases. This is going to happen whether we want to or not,
Yeah.
I think. But there is a positive version of what it could look like.
Roger, I'm not sure if you know this about me or not. One of my other jobs I've done for a while now is going in and training medical experts in communication skills. And about 2 years ago, I'm at a restaurant and it's me and a bunch of some of the best cardiologists in the country. And I said, hey, I'm just curious, what do you guys think about AI? And they kind of laughed and they're like, oh, we're all out of a job, which overstated it a little bit. But they said that already in some instances, AI is making better decisions than they are as cardiologists. It's not quite there yet, but they said we see where it's going and we're almost going to be redundant. What they said I thought was so interesting. They said the people that are going to be fine going forward are the nurse practitioners because they tend to have bedside manner, which you just talked about. They have those soft skills that some doctors just don't have. They're like robots, just spitting the facts out. We can have an actual robot do that now without that person. And I thought that was interesting that they recognized soft skills are actually going to be even more important going forward. About being there, being present, being empathetic and talking to someone. That's the part right now that cannot be replaced with AI. So I totally agree with you. With the church leader thing, I love what you said about using it as an aid to sort of save time. For this podcast, I put the notes ahead of time into a thing called Notebook LM by Google. In 15 minutes, it created an explainer video that I sent to Roger. It was decent, right? Like, it visually laid out like some of the things that we're going to talk about, just as an example of some of the things it can do. I love Russell Moore, theologian, comments a lot on current events. He said a chatbot can research, a chatbot can write, but a chatbot can't preach. And yet I know there are pastors that are doing that. Like they're basically having ChatGPT create their sermon. And that's different than what you said in outline, which I think that's great. But if you're literally getting it to type out a transcript and just sort of repeating, then you're skipping out on going back to what you said earlier with the Malcolm Gladwell. Was it Malcolm Gladwell, the desired difficulty? You're missing out on that piece and it's not coming from within. It's something that's just coming from external that's soulless in a sense.
Right.
I think that's where the real issue is. Let's transition to the next theme. And you've already hit on this a little bit, which is the idea of virtual unity versus embodied community. What do you think, Roger, we could say from the Babel story of, that some tech is good, but knowing when to say enough is important. Where's the line on this? What are good uses of tech when it comes to connecting us, whether it's virtually or across great distances? How far, when have we gone too far, I guess is my question. What do you think?
One thing that stood out to me in rereading the scripture is that when God saw we were going to build a city, I wonder if that was a hint at something where in a city, we are generally more disconnected. There's a lot more hustle and bustle, and the cohesiveness isn't as strong as, say, like a village, like a small town where you run into a lot of the same people. There's a parallel between a virtual world and a city versus actual interpersonal connections in person. Online, it can feel very connected. Like you're in a city surrounded by a bunch of people, but do you know them? Do you live life together? What their names? What do they do? And you can get that in a virtual world, a lot of that is dependent on how you utilize the
Right.
technology. If I interact with someone online, like right now, this is all virtual. And we're utilizing this because we already have a relationship, we're growing it, we're doing something productive with it. But if that virtual world is just scrolling through Instagram, liking things, commenting things, you can have people that appear to have the same interests as you, but you don't actually live life with
Right.
them. It's not the
Yeah,
same.
it's almost in a sense pseudo community because it feels in the moment you're getting a taste of community and you with another person, you agree on something, you have the same passion, and that feels good, but it's still not a substitute for flesh and blood relationships. It can augment and help a relationship, but it should not replace a relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a dangerous slope to that too, where we can talk about polarization in society, where things are created, we see certain things and we see other people have the same feeling, but there's no nuance in a specific perspective. And because we see that people are agreeing with how we feel, that could be very visceral. We never really explore anything outside of that. If you were in person or spent time with somebody to talk through certain issues out, certain ideas, and because we just see, oh, these random scattering of people kind of agree with how I feel, that's my community, when it's really like very far from it.
100%. I love that point because I think you and I would both agree that our country right now is probably as divided. I don't have to say probably, it is as divided as it's been certainly in our lifetime. And I think that's in large part because the algorithms feed us what we want. So it's like if we say we like that piece of news, then pretty soon that like all that news that we're going to get is only that news. And so when you come into real life and you say, hey, can you believe this politician did this? And they say, I have no idea what you're talking about. Well,
yeah,
because they live in a different news world. Fox people and MSNBC and people, they live in two different news worlds and don't hear anything similar to what the other side is hearing. And this is what I loved about PCC. I imagine it's still like this. It was so unique in that we had diehard Republicans and diehard Democrats worshiping in the same row. And that doesn't mean it was always easy, but because it was like real relationships and because our priority was to worship Jesus above anything else and everything else is a discussion, it worked. It doesn't mean it was easy, but it worked. And I think if people would lean into that more and have hard conversations, go to coffee and say, okay, you love Trump. I'm a never Trumper. Let's, in a Christian way, talk through this. I think our country would totally change because right now it just feels like we just get angrier and angrier.
You would never see that online because you see people try doing that on this technological platform. It rarely ever goes well.
The goal on X is not to convince anybody of anything. It's to like, how bad can you troll them? Like how angry can you make the other person, you know? And
because that's more engagement, more commenting and reshares. So it's like, so even thinking about it in that terms, like what is the purpose of the technology versus our use of the technology? You know, the purpose of this technology is to feed an algorithm to stay engaged because more screen time means more ad revenue, more money for the company. But from our perspective, that's not what our goal should be. Our goal should be actual connection, understanding with each other. And that's hard to do through technology when it should probably be done in person.
100%. And think about this, in the pandemic, people were forced online, whether they wanted to be or not. Relationship dynamics changed. One of the things I've noticed, I'm guessing it's the same in New Jersey, is that people lost their skill and ability to have real relationships in real life because they were so online. I don't think we've quite recovered from that yet. And so the sense of loneliness is as bad as it's ever been, even though we're more connected by technology than we've ever been. Have you kind of seen the same thing?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially for the younger generations, at least for us being on the older side, it could be a little more like riding a bike. It's like, oh yeah, this is what the world was like before. But for some people leading into their adulthood, leading into the workforce, it's a brand new experience for them. It's a different world and it's hard to imagine what that feels like and how to contend with that.
I think even more so for Gen Z and the generations coming up below them, because those were really formative years in how to have real relationships. And especially in New Jersey. Now, in Tennessee, Roger, I think the schools closed for a day and a half or something like that. I'm exaggerating. But then after that, it was like, what pandemic? It got back pretty quick. In New Jersey, there was no choice. You were just virtual in school for maybe 2.5 years. That did something to those kids that maybe they didn't get sick and maybe some of the rates were better, but there was a cost to that, I think, in that ability of learning how to communicate with someone in the real world. So I totally agree. Let's end on this theme of what then does it mean to have wisdom and accountability? In other words, if I'm listening to this, whether I'm a pastor or a follower of Jesus who is interested in tech, what would be a filter that I could say, okay, this is a good thing, but this is taking tech or AI too far? What does wisdom look like through this prism on, and this could be any tech? How do we look at it and how do we know what's right and what's wrong?
I think being honest about what the actual goal should be is probably one way to look at it. The one way I try to think about it is, how much money is enough for people? When your goal is, I want a lot of nice things, this kind of car, this big of a house, go on this many trips, your utilization of money and the way you look at money and how to get it is very different than someone that says, I want money just to have more time with my kids. I want more money to maybe find time to volunteer, spend time with friends, kind of thing. And technology can be the same exact thing. Are you using this because you're trying to create a name for yourself? There's a pride to it and ambition, and that's your end goal, versus I'm using this to give myself more free time to maybe help other people so they have more free time to make their life a little easier. And having maybe a healthy goal is what kind of determines whether we're moving in the right direction and how far
versus how many followers, likes, or how many views I get. And, money and tech, it's a great example, Roger, because in and of themselves, there's nothing wrong with either one. There's nothing wrong with tech. As we saw, brick and mortar is great. Money by itself, you can do good things with it. You can do bad things with it. It's about the motivation. But I think there's another parallel too. Money, even though it's neutral, I feel like you can start with the right motivations of, if I won the lottery, I would give all this money away. A lot of people start out with the right motivations. Then you look 10 years later and you're like, well, how'd that work out for you? And you see very quickly that something changes in them, as altruistic as they may have been, of like, no, I'm going to have more time to serve and more time to spend time with my family. Like you said, there's this force inside us that drives us towards ourselves and our selfishness. I think that danger could also be true in tech. In other words, I could say, my goal, I'm going to create an Instagram series or a TikTok series that directs people toward Jesus and have really altruistic motivations. And then all of a sudden I start paying closer attention to how many views am I getting? How many likes? And it very quickly can become all about me instead of about my initial motivation that in the beginning was like, no, it's about the glory of God, not about the glory of me. And so,
yeah. And part of it is when it goes back to the whole desirable difficulty thing. I think for someone to work and invest and earn wealth is very different than someone that wins the lottery.
Oh yeah.
So I would hope that someone that's actually had to go through that journey and struggle to get to that point will maybe have a more level head versus being given something. And I guess even the same thing with technology, or like when people have a certain goal, I always hope you don't get it too soon, because sometimes it helps to go through those peaks and valleys to keep yourself grounded and keep that vision and the goal in mind, keep it healthy and not warped too much.
Not shortcut the process, which technology, if we're not careful, can shortcut some of those things that are important for us to go through. That's so good.
Absolutely.
For me, I think the other thing is the idea of what do you put your trust in? With Babel, there's a sense that they're going to become self-reliant. Like I think about what God says to him, I'm like, hey, they're going to be able to do whatever they want. For me, I think we have to view whatever new tech comes along with at least a healthy bit of skepticism to say this may be good and useful, but it can't replace my relationship with God. It can't replace my trust.
Right.
And when when we start handing over decisions to technology, for example, that's where it can get a little bit scary for me of, even with something as simple as sermon prep, I think is a great positive example. You brought that up earlier. This is a little bit embarrassing, but I'll just tell you, like about 5 or 6 months ago, because it's so easy now to what they call vibe coding, where you don't actually have to know code. You can just make an app for fun. I'm so geeky. For fun, I made an app where a pastor can put in like 7 to 10 of their favorite theologians, their scripture passage, their audience, and any angle that they want to put into it. And it'll spit out like a, 10, 15, 20 page paper that gives them like this big research brief for their sermon, which I think that's a positive use in general. Well, I did that. I posted it in one of the pastor groups online. And honestly, I forgot about it. And then about a month ago, somebody reached out to me on social media and said, hey, Tim, I just want to tell you that like I was skeptical. And then I started using that app and I use it every week now. And I just want to say like, thank you so much. Turns out I'm not saying he wasn't thankful, but at the end he was like, but I just noticed this week it went down and can't get to it. It went down because I haven't been keeping it up. I didn't do anything with it. I got the app back up. As good as that is, it begins to get a little blurry for me. If you say, okay, here's the passage, what should I talk about? Like, what should be my angle? And I'm not saying that God can't use tech to help us in that way, but if we just outsource it and say, I'm going to speak like whatever AI tells me, whichever direction it tells me to go in, I think that can become a problem because now we're trusting the tech and not God. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think it's not black and white. It's not easy. I think that's just challenging. So anything else on wisdom, accountability, discernment? Like how can we discern wisely what is good and right about tech?
I think, you bring up the point of essentially it's like we never want to rely too much of ourselves. And technology is man-made. So that's kind of almost like a macro depiction of what that looks like, because to actually lean on not our own strengths, but God's strengths. Yeah. To look to him, to find direction in him, because it's not something that should be outsourced. Something when I think about it, like we're pretty big into exercising and everything. It's like you can't outsource exercise. You can't expect someone to just, maybe at some point a robot could lift this box for you. But I think there's a reason that we should do it ourselves.
Totally.
And I think that's kind of built into us. Like we're made in the image of God. And I feel like within that is understanding that there's this growth through struggles. Through difficulties. And
so not becoming so dependent on tech that we've outsourced everything. I think that's huge. And one of the things I think it's a biblical way that we can do that is, we talk about Sabbath a lot, but what would it look like to take a Sabbath from technology once a week? Like to say, okay, for Saturday, maybe for the full day, I'm going to actually go without my phone, or at least for a big part of the day. I think if we do that and we find ourselves like just not feeling right, of like, just, we start getting fidgety of like, where's my phone? That probably tells us something. That probably tells us that we're addicted to this tech that's become almost part of our body. That's not a good thing. But that practice and the discipline of saying, I'm going to go without is similar to the Babel story and to the Genesis story of it allows us to say, this isn't enough. God, you're enough. So I think that's one of the ways that we can make sure we're not totally self-reliant.
It's funny because sometimes I feel like I get so proud about myself when I forget about my phone somewhere. And I think about the nights when we have people over and hours pass by of just talking at the dinner table. And it's like, wow, really, I didn't look at my phone once.
And how do you feel after that? It feels good, right?
It's refreshing, honestly. It's something that people don't realize they need. It's funny. There's a conscious effort that can come from it at our gym. We actually have a good amount of Jewish people. The owner and one of the coaches, he loves like board games. It's like, sometimes you just want to like, have like a board game day. And just like with the friends, one of the Jewish couples is like, that's basically us every Saturday.
Man.
Everyone's just they live at Highland Park, come together, and that's what it is. It's something we could do on our own. We could do that by choice, but most people don't.
Sadly, we don't. Like Roger, you probably remember our whole table thing at PCC. The T was take a Sabbath, where we take a day to worship, feast. I love that one. Play. We've lost that art of playing because you're just so addicted to the tech side. I totally agree that taking a Sabbath, not just in general, but even from our tech, is going to be a healthy thing for us, because even if it's hard at the beginning, like you said, you get done and you realize it's been hours, like a joy that you have that I don't think comes from a phone. And yet we are so addicted. Every wedding I go to now, they have those big round tables, and I'll look up at one point in the dinner and everyone around the table, instead of engaging with the person to the left or right, what are they doing? They're looking at their phone. And I'm like, that is not healthy for us at all. The ability to say stop, to say this is enough, to say brick and mortar, that's fine, but this is taking it too far. And the wisdom to know which is which, I think that's everything. So, Roger, we've hit a lot. Any closing thoughts?
I think it's not something to be scared of. We have the power to be conscious about how we utilize certain things. It depends on your goals, your heart, and maybe your walk with Christ to see like how can we use these things, and be humble about it, have the humility to lean on the higher power versus a smaller technological power.
I think humility is so key. Part of that humility is also understanding that we by ourselves individually are not going to have all the wisdom that we need for this. So getting wisdom from the community is also important. And again, this is a stereotype, but the older generations, they're going to be very often more hesitant and cautious on tech. We should listen to that because they're going to bring up some really good points. On the flip side, as you said, as we're getting older, the generations coming up, tech is just so natural to them. They're going to have ideas and thoughts that we need to listen to as well. And so I think part of that humility is listening to different generations and then putting it through that filter of, okay, what's healthy and what is right and what gives glory to God. And so, I love that. Hey, Roger, thank you. This has been fun, man. We should do this again.
Yeah.
And it's always fun to talk with you and hear your insights. I'm going to take you up on that ride in the Tesla offer when I'm in New Jersey. Looking forward to that. We'll also, at the end of the video, if you're listening to this, we also have it on YouTube. I'll put that video I was talking about, just the podcast prep, so you can see what that looks like as well. Appreciate you guys listening. Have a great one, and we will see you next time.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into something that feels, well, both ancient and incredibly current, our relationship with technology. We're going to use a story that's thousands of years old as a kind of lens to understand the choices we're making right now with silicon and code. Let's get into it.
So our whole framework for this conversation starts right here with one of humanity's most famous, or maybe infamous, tech projects, the Tower of Babel. It's a really short story in Genesis, but man, it is packed with ideas about pride, ambition, and overreach that feel almost spookily relevant today.
And that really tees up the big question for this whole explainer. When you look at the incredible power of AI, of virtual reality, of our digitally connected world, you have to ask, are we just repeating the same old patterns? Are we just building a new kind of tower, but with different materials?
To answer that, we first need to get a handle on the original. So what was the actual blueprint for Babel? Let's break it down.
So what was really driving them? It wasn't just about building something tall. The text points to three really powerful motivations. First, it was about fame. Let us make a name for ourselves. Second, it was about security, reaching for the heavens to basically control their own destiny. And third, it was about unity, but in a defiant way, resisting the idea of spreading out and instead creating one big centralized power base.
And this whole thing reveals a fundamental choice, a tension at the heart of pretty much any new technology. Are we building a tower, something that's driven by pride and our own desire for control? Or are we building a temple, something that comes from humility, that's aimed at serving others and connecting with God? Tower versus temple. That's the lens we're going to use for the rest of this explainer.
All right, so let's apply this framework. And we've got to start with the big one, artificial intelligence.
Man, this is where you can see the two paths for AI so clearly. The tower path, that's about creating a superintelligence in our own image, right? Trying to achieve a kind of godlike knowledge, maybe even replacing authentic human labor. But the tool path, that's totally different. Think about AI accelerating Bible translation for a language that's never had it, or just handling boring admin tasks so that people have more time for actual, human-to-human connection.
And look, this isn't just some theologian making a point from the outside. You've got tech insiders, like the entrepreneur Mark Sears, making this exact connection. They see this ambition to recreate the human mind in silicon as a direct echo of the pride that drove those original builders on the plain of Shinar.
This isn't just theoretical either. It's actually been tried. A church in Germany held a service run almost entirely by ChatGPT, presented by avatars on a screen. And people were curious. Over 300 showed up. But the feedback from attendees said it all. One person said there was no heart and no soul. The AI could say the right words, sure, but it couldn't provide the human spiritual connection. It had the form, but not the substance.
And now, for a fun little meta moment, just for you, Tim and Roger, the research and the outline for this very explainer you're watching right now, it was synthesized using AI. Yep, we used it as a tool to help us structure these ideas. So it brings the question right back to us, doesn't it? As you plan your show, are we building a tower here? Or are we just using a really, really good tool?
Okay, next up, let's talk about the church itself. How is technology reshaping the very idea of community?
Think back to early 2020, when live streaming church felt like this temporary emergency fix. Well, guess what? The numbers are in, and it's here to stay. Over 90% of churches in the US are now live streaming and offering some kind of hybrid ministry. What started as a stopgap is now just how church is done.
But this huge shift has sparked a pretty fierce debate. Is the online church a tower, this kind of disembodied, consumerist faith where we get an illusion of community without any real accountability? Or is it a temple or a bridge, a vital pathway for the sick, the isolated, the skeptical, that ultimately leads people toward real-life embodied relationships? The crucial difference seems to be the end goal.
And this really gets to the heart of the whole theological discussion. As one theologian put it when talking about ministry and virtual reality, we just can't look after each other as avatars. At the end of the day, you need real believers with hearts and hands and voices. Avatars can't bring you a meal when you're sick. Pixels can't give you a hug.
Okay, our final section, and this one gets personal for all of us. Identity. Remember that phrase from Babel? Let us make a name for ourselves? I mean, isn't that basically the unofficial motto of the social media age? We are all so tempted to build an identity tower, a carefully curated personal brand, chasing followers and likes, and ultimately building a little idol of ourselves. The alternative is to see our platforms as an identity altar, a place to reflect an identity that's given to us by God and using whatever influence we have for service and to point to something bigger.
And sometimes this tower building isn't just about pride. Sometimes it's about pure old-fashioned greed. Take a look at this number. $1.3 million. That's the amount a pastor and his wife allegedly pocketed from their own congregation after launching a fraudulent crypto scheme.
I mean, this story is just a shocking modern-day parable. This pastor creates his own cryptocurrency, INDX coin. He tells his church that the Lord told us this was going to make everybody rich. He raises over $3 million from them, and the coin, of course, was basically worthless. It's a textbook, tragic example of using the language of faith and the tools of modern tech to build a tower of personal greed and deceit.
Okay, so this can all sound pretty intimidating, pretty risky. Faced with these incredibly powerful tools and all these temptations, how do we actually move forward? How do we build with wisdom instead of with pride? So what's the path forward? Well, it's not about rejecting technology entirely. It's about engaging it with wisdom. It starts with humility, asking why we're doing something, not just asking if we can do it. It means building in community, so we're not just listening to our own ambitions. It means setting real limits, like a tech Sabbath, to intentionally stop striving. And it all points to one goal: build altars for service, not towers for self. This quote right here is basically the perfect anti-Babel manifesto for our digital age. It just flips the entire goal on its head.
The point isn't to trade our integrity to get influence. The point isn't to make our name famous, but to elevate a name that is far greater.
And that's really what it all boils down to, isn't it? The technology changes, sure. We've gone from baked bricks and tar to silicon chips and blockchain. But the fundamental human choice, the posture of our hearts, it remains exactly the same.
Ultimately, the tools are in our hands, and they're more powerful than they have ever been in human history. And so the question for every single one of us is the same one those ancient builders faced out on that plain. With all this power, what are we going to build? A tower to our own glory? Or an altar to something greater? That's the question for you, Tim and Roger, and for all of us as we keep having this conversation.